The so-called Pomodoro Technique is all over the productivity and language learning niche on YouTube. Everyone from giant channels like Ali Abdaal down to smaller channels like Couch Polyglot are discussing this cognitive supercharging method called Pomodoro. Study for 25 minutes, take a break for 5, and snap! Every neuron, synapse, and other brainy sounding thing will be rocketed into the stratosphere so that you can learn a language in a week, do your masters in a day, and run a marathon in 20 minutes. And to be perfectly frank, I call bullshit.
That's frank.
And I don't just mean on the exaggerated benefits that I was just touting, I mean on the entire premise that there is anything behind this at all. I've always had a hunch that it was basically just made up, and recently I looked into it. I want to show you what I found. Shana chicos, first of all, if you're new here, my name's Lamont. I do language learning stuff, and if you're interested in learning a language, which, come on, you are interested in learning a language, just a lot of people don't know how, you might want to know that the excellent StoryLearning courses are currently 50% off for their first ever summer sale. And this isn't one of those 50% off things that seems to just last forever. This is a genuine 50% off that only lasts a bit more than 4 days. And even though you could use my link to grab one at any time, I only ever mention them when they're on sale, which isn't that often. I could mention them all the time. Like, my link works at any time, and if I'm honest, that would work out better for me, but I like getting a good deal. I figure you want to get a good deal, so yeah. If you're learning a language, starting a language, or continuing one that you want to get better at and you want to jump on that, links are in the description, but the sale doesn't last long, so don't miss out. Now, Pomodoro. I don't really care if it's not like a real thing, if it's not based on anything. It's obviously like a buzzword in the productivity and study space. It's a bit like Polyglot in the language learning space. I'll use those words if they're trending. I'm not above that. But one sunny day, I was writing a video, and often when I'm writing, I like a bit of lo-fi. If you're not familiar with lo-fi, it's this kind of thing. And I've found it immensely helpful to deep work, especially writing. But with lo-fi, I am a bit particular about it. I like it a certain tempo, a certain harmonic profile, and I know that it sounds like I'm being very particular about it, but pretty much I'm just describing what most lo-fi is. But the most common problem, in my opinion, is that the track changes far too often. It's supposed to be just background noise and not much else, so if the track's changing super often, it can actually be distracting. So I'm there writing a video, and I find a track that seems to tick all the boxes, and I leave it playing in the background. Seems perfect until this happened. What the hell was that? For a second, I thought it was in the room. Maybe my toddler had brought a toy in here or something. And I'm looking around thinking, how he hasn't been in here lately. But imagine my horror, my raw disgust at discovering that this so-called lo-fi that had seemingly been perfect had artificial oven timer sounds in it. Surely this is an elaborate prank or something. But no, despair was it when I realized that the full title of the track that I'd been listening to included the word Pomodoro, which at that moment may as well have been the word Beelzebub, destroyer of everything holy. How gross. Screw the video I'm writing this video instead, so here we are. Okay, so the first thing I learned was what Pomodoro meant. I had always just assumed it was some guy's name, like the Pareto principle. Pareto was also Italian. That principle is legit. It was first applied to economics, but it works for almost everything else as well. Did you know, for example, that at most libraries, about 10% of the items account for 80% of the loans? And there are a bunch more of those kinds of things that are also named after Italians: Picardi law, the Ferrari effect, the espresso principle. So anyway, Pomodoro, as you probably all know already, is just Italian for tomato, which is weird, by the way. As a side note, like, how did that happen? Aquí está un tomate. Pomodoro. No, amigo, no es tan complicado, solo es tomate. Viene de México. Ja, tomat, jag fattar. Tomat. Tomate. Då ser ni, till och med Finland fattar. Tomato. Es cerca, supongo. Tomato sauce. Tal vez, no lo sé. Pomodoro. Ay de Dios, ¿por qué? I wanted to know if there was any science behind it, and the first place I checked was YouTube, and there's actually not that much on this topic. There's a lot of hopping on trends as to how great it is, but there's not a lot on whether it's even a real thing. I came across the Andrew Huberman podcast. I've heard of him before, but I've never listened to the podcast regularly, and so far as I can tell, he never addresses the Pomodoro method or anything to do with 25-minute or 45-minute intervals at all, which is not that surprising because he seems to be much more university, clinical research based, so if something's essentially just a blog buzzword, they're like two different galaxies. Even if in similar niches, they still don't really cross over. What I did find is that he talks quite a lot about Ultraidian cycles, which are these sort of deeply entrenched cycles in humans that are apparently pretty firmly set at around 90 minutes. There's quite a lot of stuff that may be of interest to language learners in this particular episode, so that'll be in the description, but the gist of what he was saying is that humans basically get 2 or maybe 3 good 90-minute blocks per day. I'll come back to that in a bit, because once I was done with watching Huberman, I was forced to go where no YouTuber wants to go, and that is outside of YouTube. I'm going to read you some of an article that I found. Now, I'm not saying that this article is right and everything else is wrong, but let's just have a look. One of the most popular techniques in the field of time management is the famous Pomodoro Technique, developed in the late 80s by the software industry entrepreneur Francesco Cirillo. This sentence has a lot of red flags for me. For starters, the late 80s. That was a long time ago. I mean, I know, because I'm exactly the same age as the late 80s are, and that is old. But it was an especially different time for someone in software. This guy was saving his work to one of these bad boys. 25-minute intervals, yeah, that makes sense, because he'd probably do a bit of stuff in DOS and then have to go and get another one of these to back up to. A bit like working at Patreon in 2023. The core focus of this technique, improving productivity and efficiency using a timer, traditionally a kitchen tomato-shaped timer. Okay, so just so we're clear, as fancy as it may sound, the name for this technique that is ruining lo-fi all over the globe comes from the shape of oven timers in Italy in the 80s. Amazing. Maybe we should do everything the way Italians do it. Forget the Burj Khalifa, the Leaning Khalifa. But in all seriousness, the whole idea here, improving productivity and efficiency using a timer. What? A timer is an artificial limit on the amount of time you should work. There is something to be said for taking a break. Like, obviously, right? I'm not suggesting that anyone should be at peak mental capacity for 10 hours. But my question is, even if we ignore the 25 minutes and we say that it's a timer set to any amount of time, why have a timer at all? Is your cognitive function supposed to know that the timer has gone off and just go, oh, yep, well, I'll take a break for 5 minutes and then I'll be back on for the next 25? That's not how cognitive function works, and I think we all know that. When you're on, and you should do your best work when you're on, and then take a break. I'm about to say how my working time goes, and I'm aware of the dangers of saying this is what works for me, so anything else is wrong. But I can't imagine that I'm that much of an outlier. Because if I get going on writing, or reading, or editing videos, or composing music, which I haven't done as much of lately, but I used to do a lot, I can get into what I would consider to be a good state for at least 2 hours. Much less than that, and I wouldn't normally consider it to be a good state. On rare occasions, it might be as little as 90 minutes, but generally 2 hours is the minimum. But the maximum can be like 5 hours, maybe even 5.5, and when it's that long, it feels like the exhaustion slowly catches up to my state of flow, as if the state of flow would have continued, but I physically can't go on because I'm too exhausted. And this isn't a flex. I don't consider this to be uncommon. CoffeeZilla has said that he works in a similar way, 6 or 7 hours even. I would have to think that 2 hours would be around the median, especially considering the 90-minute Ultraidian cycles that we came across before. This is why I've always felt that 25 minutes was made up. Let's keep reading. In order to enhance concentration, the Pomodoros, that is the 25-minute blocks, are indivisible, meaning that they can't be broken up. That way, the impact of internal or external disturbances is reduced. You work on a task until you finish the Pomodoro or task. Also, it gets easier with time to find internal flow while working. Okay, so the impact of external disturbances is reduced, unless we're talking about the sound of oven timers, in which case their impact is guaranteed. It gets easier with time to find internal flow. Now, of course, by time, they mean like the days or weeks that you do this for. But to me, flow and 25-minute periods go together about as well as ankle cuffs and running. If you practiced running with ankle cuffs on, you would get faster at running with ankle cuffs on. My question is, why do you have ankle cuffs on at all? Anyone who knows what flow feels like knows that if you find it, you do not stop for any reason smaller than a house fire. And that is what oven timers are for. They are there to stop you burning your food, or worse, burning your house down. I mean, maybe I just suck at working and I've never found a true flow state, but I've never found one so hot that if I'd continued, my house would have burned down without a timer. Am I crazy here? I'm here making the case for not delivering deliberately interrupting your best work or study. Stick around for my next video. Is Canada colder than Kenya? Is the planet Jupiter bigger than this remote? This is a big remote, but do I need to measure that? Jupiter, come here. Because when you remove the name and the hype, the idea at its core is do some work, take a break, do some work, take a break. So it's not like completely idiotic. But is that really what we want for our gold standard of productive work? That it's not just completely stupid? Because I've got a better idea that I'll share with you in a bit. The article then goes on to list some benefits that a 4-year-old could figure out, like that you won't die of exhaustion because you've got built-in breaks. I mean, thank goodness that happens to me all the time. My videos are so good that I'm just like... But the real question here is the Pomodoro method backed up by science? Not surprisingly, most of the premises of this technique are to some extent arbitrary, because after all, it is just a productivity technique. You don't say. They're completely arbitrary. What do you mean somewhat arbitrary? They are made up. It may well have been based on how long tomato timers actually timed for. Is that how long you cook tomatoes for? I don't know. What I do know is that if I ever only have a small amount of time, like half an hour to do something, I'll just do something that doesn't take longer than that, like watching a video about a technique on my video editing software, catching up on emails, catching up on an Anki deck, something that's not going to take half an hour before I'm even into the task. And I want to reiterate that I've heard numerous accounts of writers, musicians, professional video editors, language learners, even athletes who can get their best work, practice, development, or whatever done in huge blocks of time. For writers, I've heard numbers like 8 hours. I think Murakami is supposed to work in 8-hour blocks. I can understand that for some people, particularly younger people, something like 1 hour might seem more reasonable. But my suggestion is to figure that out for yourself. Put all your distractions away, phone out of the room, everything. Do not use a timer and just start work on something that takes a long time and see how long you can go before you can't do anymore. That's your time. And here's why it's important that you do this. Knowledge of yourself and how to treat your body and brain so that you can get your best work done, that is going to trump YouTubers, software developers, doctors, even psychiatrists every time. Even if the reason that something works for you is not scientifically the reason that you happen to think it is, that is, if it's an incidental effect or even a placebo. If it has a positive effect, even if you think it may not be a real positive effect, you should always do what you feel helps you to be the most productive. That's why I started getting up early and working first thing. People can say, oh, well, the science says that you should wait half an hour and you should drink this kind of tea and blah, blah, blah. I find that getting up early and getting started on work straight away helps me to do that work. Screw the science. So if you find that 25 minutes on and 5 minutes off helps you to work well, that's great. Have you tried anything else? All through my teens and 20s, I called myself a night owl. So whenever someone suggested that I get up early to do work, I was always like, no, I don't really work well in the morning. But the truth is, I was not good at working at night either. I was not good at working ever. It turned out that I was really good at working in the morning. I was just never up to experience that. So the key is knowing yourself. In my opinion, the Pomodoro Technique should not even be called that. It's not a technique. It's a fancy sounding word for the bastardization of the most basic productivity principle ever, which is that we all need breaks from time to time. That's it. There's no special brain chemistry. There's no cosmic alignment in 25 minutes. In fact, that's a very small amount of time. Most psychologists believe that people find an optimal state of work after more like an hour. Pomodoro is basically a buzzword from the 80s that somehow got picked up by blogs and YouTube. It should really only ever be used to prevent fires. I'm genuinely interested to hear people's opinions on this. How long can you work for, and how long before you feel that you're in a good state of work? So let me know. And remember the StoryLearning summer sale. Learn a language through the power of story. Get 50% off at the time that this video comes out. I think there's only like 2 or 3 days left, so don't miss out. Links are in the description. I'll see you soon.